Welcome to Financial Insider Weekly. I'm your host, Michael Gray, CPA. My guest today is Maire Honorheim. Maire is a spiritual teacher of the Diamond Approach in the Ridwan School, founded by A.H. Almas, and she teaches a 3-day workshop called The Logos of Money. In the past, she had a career as a chartered accountant, which is like a certified public accountant, only it's Canadian, and then as an enrolled agent in the United States. And an enrolled agent is a person who's registered to represent people before the Internal Revenue Service. Along the way, she's had a journey of personal spiritual unfoldment that she's going to share a little bit about with us. And she's the author of this book called Money, Spirituality, and Consciousness, a guided inquiry into our personal relationship to money. And we're going to basically talk about that book. That's going to be our subject today. She lives with her husband, Alan, and their dog in Marin County. Maire, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, it's a pleasure. So to get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming a teacher about money and spirituality?
Okay, so I was working as an accountant for about 25 years, and over the course of doing that in many different ways, receivership and bankruptcy, small businesses, taxes, I began to see how people really don't know much about money, which is understandable given that we never learned about it in school. And at the same time that I was helping people with money, I was on my own spiritual journey. And I was really keeping them separate. You know, being an accountant was how I made my money. My spiritual journey was my passion. But over time, I started to understand that they actually really go together. That people need to become more conscious about their relationship to money. Because what we don't recognize is that our consciousness has been limited by our history, by our beliefs, by our conditioning, and that we aren't as open as we possibly could be. So we can't be as objective as we might be able to be about money. So I thought they go together very well. And that's what started me teaching this Logos of Money workshop, and I saw how much it was helping people, and I thought, well, this should come to a wider audience, and hence I wrote my book for everybody who would be interested.
Great, well, thank you for that. Okay, maybe you can explain to us a little bit about what consciousness is and how it relates to money.
So consciousness is really, and we can all just do this right now, is what are you aware of right now? You know, we sitting here are aware of the lights, of, you know, each other, and, you know, so it's your awareness about what's happening. What we don't recognize is that awareness, that consciousness is limited. It's been limited by basically what happened to us. It's been limited by the conditioning we got as we were growing up in our families, by the culture, by our history. So when you start to open up the consciousness, then the possibility of seeing and understanding more about reality becomes possible. And money is embedded in absolutely everything that we do. It affects not only our home and our work, but our creativity and what we're passionate about. And so, you know, it's in there in our lives. So both are really important for us.
Okay. Now you see a connection between spirituality and money, and a lot of people probably think, you know, they're diametrically opposite or whatever. Maybe you can explain a little bit about that.
Okay, so I like to use the metaphor of a cross often to explain this, because if we take, you know, the vertical of the cross, this is our consciousness. This is our growing depth, understanding, and movement towards being our deeper nature, which is really what we're here doing on planet Earth, is that movement. So that's that movement. Then we can say, okay, the horizontal movement is our movement into the world. This is our movement, you know, into the planet Earth, what we're doing, our work, whatever. And right there, because money is embedded in everything we do, it's right in the middle, right there. So if we become more conscious about our money. It can have a twofold effect. It can help us bring who we are and our deeper nature more into the world. It can also help us on our journey of becoming our deeper, truer selves.
Mm-hmm. Great.
And I'd like to say one more thing
All right.
about that.
Go ahead.
Money was intended, really, to be a support for each one of us on the planet. Mm-hmm. For each of us to bring who we are, our deeper nature, into the world. When it's just in the hands of a few, that can't happen. Mm. So we need to bring money back into an alignment, a balance, where everybody has enough money to bring their consciousness into the planet.
Great, okay. Now, in your book, Money, Spirituality, Consciousness, you talk about the intellectual, practical, and spiritual aspects of money. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so yes, that's a big subject, and
we only have a few minutes, but go ahead.
A few minutes, but basically that's what I'm doing in this book, is I'm bringing all of those in here. So on the practical aspect, it's because we didn't learn about it in school, and like I said, when I was working with people, I saw there's a lot of misunderstandings about money, or just some not really understanding how it works. It really isn't that difficult. So that's what I try and do, is to bring some exercises, some things to really make money to understandable for people, so they can see it. It isn't so difficult. If you can add and subtract, and I know we can all do that, then you can understand money. So that's one aspect, that's the practical aspect. Mm-hmm. Then there is the kind of global, looking at our history, what's happened to us over time. Like, for example, the history for us in the West, the history of the Western Church has really impacted us. When Protestantism came in and we went to secularism, the age of reason and the scientific method, that kind of separated us in a certain sense from our deeper spiritual nature. And so, looking at things like that, plus, for example, our instincts, because of the secular nature that has been, we've put aside our spirituality for the secular. We've given our instincts, the animal part of us that just wants more. It doesn't care about spirituality or others, or it only cares about, give me more, I want my meat, I want this. So we've lost our connection in a certain way with our spirituality. So I'm showing how we can bring that back together through our money too, and how that would impact the world. And one other aspect to that is, people often say, well, I don't like money, I don't want to look at money, it's very difficult. But if you don't really look at money, if you don't understand it, if you don't understand your relationship to it, then you won't be able to discern what's going on globally, locally, and you won't be able to make choices. Mm-hmm. You won't know who's telling the truth.
Yeah. Well, I think another thing is you lose some control in your life.
And you lose that's a big one. You lose control in your life because other people are telling you what to do, and you don't know, so you can't make choices.
Right. If you don't understand
exactly
how this stuff works. All right. Now you talk about a globalization crisis in the book. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. So, as we have seen through the internet and what's happening around the world, is that globalization is here already. Mm-hmm. But our money systems have not kept up with that. Uh-huh. They're still kind of more national currencies and issues and ways of looking at it. So now there is no matching political process around the globalization. And yet money is moving out into globalization. So to me, that's a crisis. Okay. We need to bring our awareness, our consciousness into the global choices. So like a few years ago, you would say with charity, think globally, act locally. I would say the same thing is true about money right now. Mm-hmm. Yes, there's a global crisis, But if we bring our consciousness and make personal choices right here, right now, that support the global, it will make a difference for everybody.
I think one of the most important things that you talk about is the role of debt in our society and maybe how it's sort of gotten out of control and so forth. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Well, there's two aspects to that. One is that our whole money system is predicated on two things. One, growth, and the other is debt. And we are running out of growth. We can't keep growing. And
so the question is, can our planet support it?
Can our planet support it?
Is it
That's what I mean. We're running out of ecology. We can't keep sustaining this. So we can't keep sustaining growth. So what's ending up happening then is that, as long as there was growth, debt wasn't so important. You could grow your way out of being in debt. But now we're finding out that with growth slowing down, that there's people who are being left with debt. And so it stops with them. It's easy to get into debt. It's very difficult to get out of debt. And a lot of people are being left with a lot of debt. And there's another aspect to that, which is, what's happened in our history here in the United States for the last 50 years or so or more, where instead of giving money to workers, the difference between people who have and the people who have not is gone. Corporates are paying them. Instead of giving that money to workers in higher wages, what's happened is it's been lent to them through credit cards and stuff. So they've gone into debt. So in a certain way, debt has stripped the wealth of middle-class Americans. So those two things have made money really out of balance. And that's kind of the canvas that we are now living with here. And I think people have become very aware there's something wrong with our money system. They're not really sure what. And so that's some of the things that I talk about in my book too.
Yeah. So one of the things that you suggest to people, insist upon, maybe I should say, is basically to abandon their credit cards and really to avoid debt.
Yes.
And so it's so ingrained in our society now. But maybe you can just comment on that just a little bit.
Well, yes. I think we need to start living within our means. Partly because of the ecology. We just can't keep supporting this consuming. One of the statistics in the book is how much personal storage. There was no personal storage in the 60s. People just bought what they needed. Now we buy all this stuff to put it in storage lockers, which is kind of insane when you think about it. So we're all consuming more and more and more. We think that the more we have is a measure of success. We think the more we have is going to keep us from dying, maybe. I don't know. It's a funny thing. But so, that's what we're doing, is consuming more. So maybe we have to move towards sufficiency. What if what we had was enough? Then what you pay attention to. If you don't have enough, that's going to be what your mantra is. That's what you're going to believe. That's what you think you're going to need to take. If you change it to, actually, I have enough. I can support myself. I can support my family. I don't need more iPods. I don't need more boots. I don't need more newer car. I mean, one of the things I say is the best car to buy is the one you already own. So if we start to move into sufficiency rather than more is better, so that's...
General Motors would be very unhappy.
Yes.
All right. Let's talk about stewardship for a minute. I've had different guests talk about stewardship from time to time on this show. Why don't you talk a little bit about how that plays into this? And I think it plays very well into particularly what we're talking about, caring for our planet, that sort of stuff.
Right. So, the way that I look at stewardship is different maybe than some people look at it. The way that I look at it is that money flows through our lives. So everything that is manifested through spirit, through a higher power. And so whatever money comes through our lives is really, we have a responsibility towards that. And our responsibility towards that is one of stewardship, that we need to take care of of that money that's flowing through our lives. And one of the things that I've often said that to people who come and see me, they say, well, why does a balance sheet add up to zero? And I say, because you can't take any of it with you. We can't take our money with us, and so it's not ours. It's an energy. It's something that we can be responsible about. So that's how I see stewardship. And so, it's about becoming impeccable around your money and not kidding yourself. Okay. So that's where they can come together.
Okay. I guess you could say your whole book, in many respects, is about inquiry.
Right.
It's like the process that
Right.
you're suggesting that people use to improve their awareness or consciousness about
Right.
money.
Right.
Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Okay. So this is the method that I used in the Diamond Heart School, what you were referring to, which is starting where you are, right here, right now. So like, what are you feeling right now doing this interview? What's coming up for you? And using that to go more deeply into yourself. So it's like, instead of being outwardly focused, to start to move your consciousness inward. And it's the same with money. It's like, if you want to know exactly where you are with money, you have to have a balance sheet. You have to have an income statement. You have to know exactly where you are with your money before you can start a deeper inquiry into what is your relationship to your money. So that's where, again, where they meet and match.
So there's two things I want to bring up related. So first of all, I sort of think of it as like a self-examination.
Yes, a self-examination.
So you're
exactly.
looking at your own thoughts and feelings related to this stuff.
And understanding where they came from.
Yeah. So your relationship with money and your understanding of money.
Right.
And then the other thing, though, is that there's a very practical, hard-nosed accountant's part of it, and that
Right.
is actually, because some people think, okay, well, spiritual, it means I'm going to be meditating in the corner or maybe saying some prayers or whatever.
Oh, around your money?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and instead,
Yeah.
what we're really talking about is, let's write down the numbers.
Right. So let me give you an example of
Yeah.
one of the exercises. So there's a lot of exercises in this book. So it's not just a
Yeah.
discourse.
Yeah.
It actually brings you to doing exercises.
Yes.
So one where I can show you where it is really you're working, but it brings awareness to more that your spiritual side is like taking your income statement, for example. So your cash flow. So that's like your list of income and expenses for a month. And I say people should do that for a month because that's most understandable for people. We pay rent by the month, we pay expenses usually by the month, we get paid by the month. So that's a way that we can look at things for most people. So you take your expenses for the month, and then you take what your hourly wage is, whatever it is, and you divide that into every expense that you have, that you spend money on. And then you can see how many of your life hours are you spending in each of those things? And it would make a big difference if you thought, that purse is going to cost me 3 or 4 hours of my life. And it's the same with debt. When you go into debt, you end up paying, your life in interest, your time in interest. So you can start to look at, wow, am I really living my value system here? Or am I caught in something else? Am I buying things that I don't really need or really want? And I guarantee that if you do that process, you will spend less money and you will start to live a life that is more in alignment with your value system.
Great. Okay. So, we talk a little about the value system. I mean, in a sense, then money also though can be used as an expression for ourselves.
Right.
So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Right. So, as you do inquiry and look at your money issues and see where you're caught and how, what other people think is a value system, or you start to realize success is not what you want, with your money. It doesn't mean success, that success means doing what you love to do.
Mm-hmm.
and having time with your family
Mm-hmm.
and having rest and not being in debt, and a bunch of different values will start to show up. What will happen is, as those values change in you, it will change how you express yourself in the world. It will even, if you have money to invest, it will also change the investments that you choose.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You might not choose investments that any longer plunder the planet. You might say, no, that is not a value that is in my heart. I want to support something else. So when you change your value system, it has to, because money, like I said, money is embedded in everything you do. As you bring your changed value system into your money, it will show up in the world. Imagine if all of us did that.
Mm-hmm.
What a change there could be in the world.
Right. One thing that we haven't talked about yet, and it sort of relates to this inquiry process, is inner resistance.
Yes.
And so you talk about quite a bit about inner resistance to dealing with money and how it relates to resistance to spiritual growth. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
Right. So, when we got conditioned, it created, our ego structures. And our ego structures, if you've ever noticed about our ego structures, they really don't want to change. They really think that they're doing a great job, and
Get
that
set in our ways, don't we?
we get very set in our ways. So when you start bringing up, looking at some of the issues that I bring up in the book, based on our history, like issues around trust, issues around hunger, nourishment, not enoughness. There's all kinds of history in us. When you start to go to do this inquiry and start to go in, the ego is going like, I already figured this out. I already know what you're supposed to do here, so I'm not interested in this. So it will show up as this feeling of, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to go here.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to, understand that that's going to be part of any journey of consciousness. Money, not money.
So we sort of have to push ourselves out of our comfort zone sometimes to make those changes.
We have to push ourselves out of our comfort zone. And if we don't, the world is doing it for us, if you've noticed.
Okay. You also brought up another book from another Bay Area person here, Lynn Twist, wrote a nice book called The Soul of Money.
Right.
I hope someday to have her as a guest on the show, but we'll see.
Right.
Anyway, you talk about enoughness,
Right.
and she talks about sufficiency.
Right.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about, how these come together.
How these come together? Well, really, I think they're the same thing in just different words.
Okay.
Like a lot of people are recognizing that we don't, like I said before, we don't need to fill, all these storage units full of stuff. We don't need that. We don't need to have a iPhone, iPod, Air, Air Mac, and all these things.
The very latest.
Or we don't need two of them in one family. We start to say, maybe that isn't where we should be putting our energy. Maybe we need to understand that, what Lynn Twist's organization that she's involved in, the Pachamama, what they talk about is that if you have a roof over your head, clothes in your closet, and food in your refrigerator, you're better off than 87% of the people on the planet.
Right, right.
Right. So maybe if we started to look in terms of sufficiency or enoughness, we wouldn't, be overloading the planet.
Okay. The last chapter you talk about the heart.
Yes.
So how are the money and the heart related?
So really, what we are doing here is our desire. Really, it's not for more stuff. It isn't for more money. That will never get us what we really want. What we want is to come closer to our deeper, truer nature. What's closer to God, a higher power, whatever you want to call it, and that's what our heart leads us to.
Mm-hmm.
When we start to inquire and feel, what our deepest longing is, it is to be, our deeper, truer self, not to have more, stuff. And so it wakes us up to the longing towards love. And so a lot of spiritual paths say desire is a bad thing. Yes, distorted desire is a bad thing when it starts to go for stuff. But the desire to be who you are on your deeper nature is really motivated by love. Mm-hmm. So imagine if we were to bring our heart into our money, then money could be love.
Mm-hmm. So it's that old song.
Yes.
What the world needs now is love.
Right.
Okay. We just have a little time left. Maybe you can just sort of throw out a final thought or a summation or whatever you would like.
Well, I would like to just invite people to
Mm-hmm.
consider this journey, to consider jumping into a journey of really looking at their money and their consciousness. And really behind that is the deeper invitation is to look at your consciousness, because I really believe that's what we are here to do. But I think that money is a great medium mm-hmm. for us to start to wake up mm-hmm. to that consciousness. So it would be a journey that I would love to invite everybody to come on.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Maire, thank you so much for joining me and being my guest today.
My pleasure.
Coming all the way down from Marin County
yes.
to San Jose. And I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I've been excited about it. Read your book, and I do recommend to people to actually look at it. And you will find, if you actually do the exercises, you will become more aware of what's happening with money in your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You will.
Okay. So with that, folks, we'll see you next time on Financial Insider Weekly.